Hi there and welcome. Today we're looking at what it takes to build an effective presentation, one that helps you communicate concepts and ideas to people effectively and get your point across in a way that would be memorable for your audience. Many of us have sat in meetings or in classes that are extraordinarily boring as the teacher just drones on and on and on, or worse, has slides that they just read to us that we could have read on our own and been done with much quicker. And so those are ineffective presentations. We want to look at what we can do to make our presentations effective and get people more engaged. So part of it has to do with your presentation style. So let's talk quickly about eye contact, speaking clearly, maintaining confident posture, and professional attire. Overall, the biggest guiding principle you should have when you give a presentation is to be confident. Know that you are the expert. And if you've put together the material, you should know what it is you're about to say because you know the content. And so if it helps, write a script if you need to and practice it several times so that you know what you're about to say and you feel ever confident of what it is you're going to say so that your audience who doesn't know what you have to share can learn from you. Never let your slides be the primary source of information. You are the source of information. You are the expert. When it comes to eye contact, make sure you scan throughout the room. Make direct eye contact with people. A lot of times folks look over the heads of the people that are in the audience and they miss out on this powerful skill, which is to make direct eye contact, which draws people in and keeps them engaged. One trick that you can use is to look around the room for the people that are nodding along, that are going along with what you have to say, and find 3 or 4 or 5 of those nodders all around the room and make your eyes to sort of travel from one person to the next and scan the room as you go so that you involve everyone in the room in your presentation. Make sure you're speaking clearly. Speak to the whole room, not just to people in front. That means you're going to have to modulate your voice a little bit for emphasis. You're going to have to speak up so that people can hear you, especially if there's background noise. And sometimes you might have to vary your cadence. Sometimes you'll have to speak quickly and then maybe stop and slow down or leave a pause, some dead space where there's nothing being said for emphasis to try and, again, engage people in your conversation, engage people in your presentation, and make sure that they're following along. Posture is also important. You have to look confident in yourself, even if sometimes you don't feel confident in yourself. And that means standing up straight, facing your audience, engaging with them directly, trying not to keep your back to them. And that means you can't read from your slides. It goes back to knowing what you're going to say and being the expert so that you're always facing the people you're talking to. Keep your arms to your side. Don't cross your arms, put your hands in your pockets, hold your arms behind your back. Those are all signs that show that you just don't feel comfortable with yourself or what you have to say. And if you're not comfortable with what you have to say, your audience is going to assume that you don't have anything worth saying. Another thing you can try and do is just move around the room a little bit, which helps, again, draw your audience in because as you are traveling through the room, people feel, if only to be polite, to be engaged with what you have to say when you're close to them and you've got physical proximity. So the best thing to do is be loose. You can talk with your hands. You can make gestures with your body, which again helps give emphasis to what you have to say. And the more confident you appear, the more likely it is that your audience will believe that you have something worth saying. As far as professional attire goes, the best thing you can do is dress better than your customer or your client. Dress better than your audience so that you appear as, again, the expert. The other thing you want to do is depends on what type of audience you have. It will dictate what you wear. If it's a business formal situation, you'll want to wear a suit. So if you're speaking before a business organization, you need to dress up to match that organization or that group. Or it could be business casual, in which case you could wear khakis and a button-down shirt or a skirt or a blouse or something nice. It's not quite as formal as a suit, but nicer than jeans and a t-shirt. Comes to making slides and visuals, there's some key things to keep in mind we'll talk about here briefly. Pictures are powerful. Text size makes a difference. Keeping your text simple and using clear fonts that make it easy to read, while keeping in mind the fact that color is very important. The choice you make makes a huge difference, and that bullets can be a powerful tool to help make your slides easier to read and understand and make them more powerful. With slides, the guiding principle, you are the presentation. You are the expert. The slides you use are simply a prompt for you. They're in your language to help you remember what you are going to tell the rest of the audience. You need to be more than just what's on your slides, because if all the information is on your slides, we don't need you. But we want you. We do need you. That's why you are giving the presentation. So make sure that you are providing more value and more information than what appears just on your slides. As it turns out, slides are not even necessary for good presentations, though if you're going to have them, you'd better make sure they're very effective. And for our purposes in class, when we give presentations, while slides are not necessary in the real world, we're asking that you do make slides for each presentation that we give in class so that you can continue to develop and refine your skill in making useful visuals. One thing to keep in mind is that pictures are powerful. They say that pictures are worth 1,000 words, and that's very true because pictures can convey very powerful emotions within your audience, and it engages them in their imagination as you're sharing information. For example, I could talk about the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and I could give you information about how people come to the memorial and make rubbings of people's names, family members that they lost as a result of the war. I can tell you how they leave gifts at the base of the monument. I can describe what the monument looks like to you, and I can put all those in words. And that might help your audience understand a little bit about what the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is and the emotional events that occur when people show up. Or I can show you a picture looking at what it actually is that people do to get that name of their loved one that they can take home with them to remember the people that they lost. The picture is so much more powerful, and you can tell the story and describe what goes on there and never have a single word on your slide other than just this picture. And so think about whether you actually need words on your slides, and could you use pictures to really get across the same idea that you're trying to use with words. And we also have the rule of 6. If you're going to use words, follow the rule of 6. That means be the expert. Let the slides be a prompt. Keep yourself to no more than 6 words per line and no more than 6 bullets per slide. If you need more bullets, that's fine. Use a second slide in order to put them there. It not only keeps the information on one slide limited, but it also makes sure that your font, which we'll talk about in a second, is readable to the people in the audience. Speaking of fonts, text size matters. If you use a 12-point font, it might look okay on a TV or on your computer screen, but if you're in an audience, you might not be able to see that, especially if you're further in the back. That's too small. Sometimes you can get a much bigger font and people can see it, but then it takes up a lot of space. So you're looking for something in the middle. So these fonts, 12, 18, 24, way too small for a presentation, whereas something like a 32 or a 36 might work. One gauge to determine whether you've got the right size font is to put it on your computer screen, sit about 6 feet back, and see if you can read it comfortably. If you can read it comfortably from 6 feet back, then that's probably the appropriate size font for your audience. Also, you'll want to keep your text simple because it should be adding to your presentation, not distracting from it. So using too many colors can be an issue. Stick to 1 or 2 as much as possible. Otherwise, it just creates a difficulty in your audience trying to follow along with what you have written there. And don't use too many fonts and styles either. Stick to 1 or 2 fonts maximum on a particular slide and try to be as consistent as possible, again, to make it easier for your audience. And pick something fancy. There is a difference between what we call a serif font, which has little flourishes, and sans serif fonts, which are much clearer. So look for the sans serif font. Italics can be hard for people, but bold fonts are easy. So if you want to have an emphasis, bold is a great way to go. Or use a color that will help that one word you want people to see to pop out. It's also important to try and keep things simple. So if you have a data chart like this, you're trying to share information about numbers. These numbers are overwhelming to your audience. They're way too specific and there's just a lot going on. It's hard to follow. So you might want to instead simplify this because this is way too detailed. maybe simplify it and say, well, I'm going to give numbers in the millions. So now these are far smaller numbers, much easier to understand and follow. But even then, I would say that this is difficult for your audience to make any sense out of, because it's just a data dump. Maybe instead, you might want to consider giving them a graph or a chart. A graph or a chart gives them a visual cue that helps people begin to identify trends that might be happening in your numbers or data. And it helps your audience to see what the story is behind the numbers, to see a meaning behind what you're trying to show them. If you're going to use a chart, make sure it's easy to read. So be aware that too many lines makes things too difficult for people to follow. So in this case, there are just far too many grid lines. Simplifying it and reducing the grid lines makes it much, much easier for people to see and interpret along with you what it is you're trying to share. Color matters. Use contrasting colors. Avoid putting light on light or dark on dark. You want to have an opposite so that it's much easier to see. So the text on the left is kind of hard to see. You've got light on light at the top and dark on dark at the bottom. But if you look at the right, we've got a dark and light contrast that makes it so much easier to see and for your audience to read. And using bullets and lists can also help. We could say, for example, that instructional technology is a complex integrated process involving people, procedures, ideas, devices, and organization for analyzing problems and devising, implementing, evaluating, and managing solutions to those problems in situations in which learning is purposive and controlled. We could say that, we could put that on a slide, but that's a lot for your audience to take in. Or you could instead say instructional technology is a process and describe what you mean by a process. You can say that it involves people, procedures, and tools, and that it is solutions-based, and then give more context, more information as you go through each of the bullets. This visually is much easier for your audience to follow and is less overwhelming for them and is more likely to keep them engaged. At the end of the day, the most important thing to keep in mind is that giving effective presentations is a skill that will take time to develop. And while as a student, it's very stressful for many people and something that seems overwhelming to most of us when we first start, it does become easier the more you practice. So be patient with yourself, be confident in yourself, and know that over time, this will become a much, much easier thing for you to do, and you'll be more effective at giving presentations. And at the end of the day, as you become adults and enter into the professional world, it will be a skill that will be invaluable to you as you develop your career.